Honestly, I think that I was just trying to avoid it, pretending like these issues didn't exist. And then once those issues slap you in the face, you really have no choice but to come to terms with what's really going on. And so I'm just going to be 100% honest. I mean, I remember when the BLM protests began in 2020. Obviously, in the beginning, I was very supportive of those protests, but every night they would quickly devolve into riots. And I remember messaging with friends, even messaging with colleagues about being fearful because, where I live is very close, like walking distance to, a main boulevard where a lot of the rioting took place. And on one hand, here I am in my personal life, seeing the injustice of all of these small, in my community, Latino-owned businesses being completely...
Anna Kasparian just shook the progressive world, and left-wing media is in panic mode. Once a cornerstone of the Young Turks, known for defending liberal policies and challenging conservatives, she's now breaking the mold. In a fearless, no critique, Kasparian exposes the hypocrisy, censorship, and brutal ideological tests plaguing today's left. From the chaos of 2020's riots to the grip of audience pressure, she reveals how progressive media punishes its own, and she's not holding back. Curious why so many leftists stay silent? This is the answer.
Form our property and commercial property tax code in California, which people don't know this. We have very high sales taxes, very high income taxes, but like almost a medieval commercial tax property situation with Prop 13. Try to reform that, they call you a racist. So it's taking this language from the social justice left to the point where none of these words seem to mean anything. They're used by the oligarchs, by the people in power. And it took me, I have kind of had an incremental march here. From writing for The Nation, writing for kind of more institutional left-wing outlets to, I still have a lot of these values, I have a lot of these beliefs and concerns, but I feel, I'm with you. The Unaligned is a great Substack name, by the way, because I feel unaligned. Could you talk a little bit about your journey? Like, what were there certain moments where you said, what's going on here?
So, a lot of different things happened, and, I think there's this misconception that a few things happened to me personally, and that was all it took for me to, have a reactionary response. And that is not the case. Those personal things that happened to me forced me to come to terms with some very real flaws that I was seeing on the left. But honestly, I think that I was just trying to avoid it, pretending like these issues didn't exist. And then once those issues slap you in the face, you really have no choice but to come to terms with what's really going on. And so I'm just going to be 100% honest. I mean, I remember when the BLM protests began in 2020. Obviously, in the beginning, I was very supportive of those protests, but every night they would quickly devolve into riots. And I remember messaging with friends, even messaging with colleagues about being fearful because, where I live is very close, like walking distance to, a main boulevard where a lot of the rioting took place. And on one hand, here I am in my personal life, seeing the injustice of all of these small, in my community, Latino-owned businesses being completely crushed. They lose everything, right? And of course, there's this BS excuse.
Tells a story of ideological disillusionment that resonates with many former leftists. Once a staunch supporter of the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests, she embraced their mission to confront systemic racial injustice. But as the protests devolved into nightly riots, Kasparian faced a stark reality. While the national spotlight focused on police brutality, her own community suffered. Small businesses, many run by Latino immigrants, were looted and left in ruins. When she raised concerns about this destruction, she was forced into an impossible choice: stay silent and avoid being labeled racist, or speak out and risk professional and social exile. For too long, she buried her unease, but the contradictions within the movement became impossible to ignore. Her awakening wasn't rooted in personal grievance, it came from witnessing firsthand how progressive rhetoric often glossed over real-world consequences. Kasparian's revelations go beyond policy failures. She highlights the deeper, insidious problem of audience capture in progressive media. Many left-wing commentators, she argues, don't truly believe the narratives they promote. Figures like Destiny, David Pakman, and Hazen Piker, she suggests. Know that stepping outside progressive orthodoxy risks losing subscribers, sponsorships, and credibility within their ideological circles. This creates an echo chamber where questioning fundamental tenets, whether on criminal justice, gender ideology, or economic policy, invites swift backlash. Kasparian doesn't see these commentators as unintelligent, she sees them as trapped. The drive to maintain a loyal following often outweighs the pursuit of truth, producing a media ecosystem where dissent is punished and ideological conformity rewarded. The result, an intellectually stagnant left, where self-censorship has become the norm.
But no, it's not that simple, okay. But, watching my own community fall apart, and then going on my show, and if I'm completely honest, like, terrified of even bringing any of that up, because I understood the injustice and agreed that something needed to be done about the injustice toward George Floyd and individuals like him. But I was also terrified that if I brought up things like riots, I would automatically be assumed to be some sort of hateful bigot or racist, and I'm just not. I just see the damage that's being done to my community and communities across the country as all of this is going on. So I dealt with that conflict for a little while, and I felt pretty disgusted with myself, because I want to be honest with the audience, but there was also some self-preservation involved, because I didn't want people to do to me what they're doing now, actually. And then finally, it just got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore. Like, I saw what was happening and I needed to be honest about it. Obviously, things happened to me as well. But more importantly, there was a disconnect between progressive policymakers and legislators and what their constituents wanted. And they just ignored their own constituents. A perfect example.
Kasparian underscores the growing disconnect between progressive politicians and the communities they claim to serve. She points to Representative Ilhan Omar as a striking example. Despite explicit opposition from the black community in her district to defunding the police, Omar and other progressive leaders push forward with the policy driven more by ideology than the needs of their constituents. Kasparian also highlights the backlash faced by Armenian and immigrant parents in Glendale, California, who questioned elements of the public school gender curriculum. Instead of engaging in dialogue, Democratic politicians and progressive activists swiftly labeled them as fascists and bigots. This reflexive moral condemnation, she argues, exposes a deeper issue within today's left, a preference for virtue signaling and ideological posturing over genuinely representing the concerns of working class and minority.
Omar from Minnesota. So her district demanded that they do not defund the police. Okay? The black community said, we don't want you to defund the police. There is a higher crime rate. We are worried about it. We do not want you to cut funding for police. The vast majority of them did not want that. Okay. Ilhan Omar went forward with advocating for defunding the police anyway. And I was just like, okay, well, who are we representing here? Are we actually representing marginalized communities, or are we just representing what our cause believes to be right, despite what those communities desire?
Another example that's even closer to home for you, which is, which I just think is wild, is like, do you remember about a year ago in Glendale, there were all these parents who were protesting the gender curriculum at Glendale public schools, and Glendale is a largely Armenian but also just immigrant-based community. It's like, probably middle-class immigrants. I did go down and report on it. I didn't take the time to talk to these parents or anything, so this is just casually observing as a news consumer. But whatever you think about their critique about the curriculum, these were just parents protesting what they saw as the shortcomings of the education of their own children. And like Gavin Newsom, Adam Schiff represents Glendale, doesn't he? He represents Pasadena and I think part of Glendale. Yes. Mm-hmm. They're like going on Twitter and calling them fascists and comparing them to Nazis, and I'm just like, it was like flabbergasting.
Contrast to those still trapped by ideological conformity. Kasparian praises figures like Joe Rogan and Russell Brand for breaking free from progressive orthodoxy, unlike leftist commentators who continue pandering to their base. These figures follow the truth wherever it leads, even at the risk of losing audience support. Kasparian acknowledges the danger in taking such a stance, but sees it as essential. Those who dare to challenge the dominant progressive narrative are often quickly branded misogynists, racists, or reactionaries, making it nearly impossible for independent thinkers to influence the movement from within. Yet Kasparian insists that seeking truth must take precedence over appeasing an audience. She respects those, like herself, who are willing to walk away from ideological constraints in pursuit of honest discourse. Her departure from the left reflects a broader phenomenon. An increasing number of progressives are growing alienated by the movement's intolerance for dissent. Today's left, she argues, is less about debating ideas or addressing everyday concerns and more about a self-righteous crusade where ideological purity trumps real-world consequences. The pressure to conform is immense, and those who refuse are swiftly cast out. Kasparian sees this not just as a personal reckoning, but as an opportunity. By speaking out, she challenges her former allies and encourages others to do the same. The question now is whether more voices will follow her lead or whether the progressive left will continue its descent into an echo chamber of self-delusion. Either way, Kasparian's story serves as a warning. Any movement that cannot tolerate internal criticism is destined to fail.